Education is transformative. It builds you up to achieve your dreams, however bold they may seem. Education should inspire you
to turn your ambitions into reality. Welcome to the University of London. It can bring life-changing knowledge to hundreds of thousands of students worldwide. However you study, gain both a community of global alumni
and a prestigious degree to help you push further and reach higher than you ever have before. With the University of London.
Hello everyone, and a very good afternoon or good morning to those joining us live from wherever you are. Welcome to the University of London and SIM Lecture 2022. My name is Geraldine and I'll be your MC this evening. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to our University of London and SIM Lecture on a changing accountancy profession, future impacts, directions, shapes. Over 400 guests have signed up, and some of you will be watching this virtually in Singapore, United Kingdom, and other parts of the world. Welcome. Before we begin, for those present in our Grand Performing Arts Theatre, please remember to switch your phones to silent mode. SIM started with one class of 40 University of London students, and it now has an enrollment of 5,000 students in 32 undergraduate and postgraduate programs, ranging from accountancy to politics, AI, and data science. Armed with a University of London degree, our students at SIM have done well in industry, and some have completed their master's or doctoral studies at reputable universities like Chicago, Cambridge, LSE, and UCL. Recent world events have brought about both anticipated and unexpected changes to the world of accountancy. In order to remain competitive and relevant, what are the drivers behind these changes? What are the consequences and potential for the future of the accounting profession? We have with us today an esteemed panel to take us through the discussion. Our presenters are Professor Wei Kwok Kee, Provost of the Singapore Institute of Management, Professor Alan Parkinson, Professor of Financial Education and School Deputy Director in Education from the UCL School of Management, Associate Professor Lindsay Chew, Associate Professor in Accounting Education from the UCL School of Management, Mr. Kon In Tong, Managing Partner at Fu Kong Tan LLP. Lastly, Mr. Tan Lee Tong, CFO Practice Lead at Workday. We look forward to a fruitful exchange of views and ideas on this very interesting and current theme. To our audience, there will be an opportunity to raise questions during the Q&A segment later. You may wish to share your comments or questions by keying in the event code, #SIMUOL at slido.com. If you're a member from the Singapore Professional Accounting Bodies, you may scan the QR code to register your attendance for today's lecture to claim your CPE, CPD hours. As Provost of the Singapore Institute of Management, Professor Wei Kwok Kee provides overall leadership for SIM's academic vision within the Institute's broader mission of equipping and empowering learners for the future of work. May I now invite Professor Wei Kwok Kee to deliver the opening remarks. Professor Wei, please.
distinguished guests, speakers, students, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you and very good morning to guests tuned in from the UK and around the world. Welcome to the year 2022 University of London and SIM lectures. This is an annual event both institutions are proud to organize. I hope it shows how serious we are about the global community and about future relevant discussions. With the lifting of safe management measure in Singapore, we are delighted to host the lecture on our beautiful SIM campus once again. COVID has taught us that learning knows no boundaries. We are pleased to have a virtual audience today too. 3 university member institutions provide academic directions for the program that taught at SIM. They are London School of Economic and Political Science, Goldsmith, and UCL or University College London. SIM worked very closely with these 3 institutions to enrich the professional and personal development of our students and alumni through a portfolio of courses high in quality and rigorous in academic staff. Today, I'm extremely pleased that Professor Alan Parkinson from the UCL School of Management is here to deliver the keynote speech. This event celebrates the launch of the Master of Science in Accounting and Financial Management and a refresh of the Master of Science in Professional Accountancy, which now becomes the member of many more professional bodies. These 2 master programs are led by UCL School of Management. In fact, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate UCL for being ranked as number 8 in the year 2023 QS World University Ranking. I'm looking forward to today's discussions. I'm sure you will enjoy the insights by Professor Parkinson and our 2 distinguished panelists. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Wei. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker is Professor Alan Parkinson, Professor of Financial Education and School Deputy Director in Education from the UCL School of Management. Based at the University College London, Professor Parkinson is a Fellow of the Centre for Distance Education at the University of London and played a significant role in the development and delivery of the University of London online global programs, Master of Science in Professional Accountancy, and Master of Science in Accounting and Financial Management launch. Professor Parkinson is very involved in UCL's online MBA and UCL's MBA venture with Peking University, on top of being a faculty advisor at Harvard Medical School. In addition, he was awarded the 2018 UK Public Sector Accountancy Lecturer of the Year by PQ Magazine. On what the future holds for a changing accountancy profession, please join me to welcome Professor Parkinson to share. Professor Parkinson, please.
Thank you, Geraldine, for that. With those attributes, I hope I can live up to those. And of course, following on from the provost, that's really going to be a challenge. So welcome here. Before I forget right at the end, I've said to Geraldine, thank you for the introduction. Thank you to Geraldine for being MC, for Ching-Wei for some help that she's going to give, and also to our panelists and to our moderator. You'll see that we've got things behind us on the screen. I'll check there. Everything's fabulous apart from the photograph that you see on the extreme side of the screen. There'll be a number of slides. We have slides. It's hopefully, no, not hopefully, it will not be death by PowerPoint, I assure you. I'm going to keep those there as a backdrop, partly for my own reference, but also to give you a reference in terms of what we're talking about. In terms of, whoops, let's just make sure that's moving on. Yes, it is moving on. What are we here for? Well, the broad theme is the accountancy profession and the changes that are occurring now and are likely to occur in the future, which will change the shape of accounting. We need to look at the impacts and what the consequences will be. We've already started to see some of those consequences. Based here in Singapore, Singapore has been at the forefront of embracing those changes. And sometimes we're negative, aren't we? We pull back from change. And it's to the credit of some of the working groups that have come forward to embrace change in Singapore that they're showing a positive attitude to that. We'll go through those changes. We'll look at some of the impacts. I don't know if I can give you answers. I think I can raise some issues and give you some insights. And then in the panel discussion with colleagues who are far more experienced than me in what goes on in those changing practices, hopefully we'll be able to explore those issues and insights and pull them apart. Before we have that panel discussion before the end, hopefully I'll be serious anyway, but maybe I'll get just a little bit more serious towards the end when we look at, well, if accountancy as a profession is changing, should we be seeking to redefine accountancy? Should there be a different definition of accountancy? We all know, to a lesser or greater degree, we all know about the technical definition of accountancy, of accounting within accountancy. And we all talk about the numbers and the way in which we do things. We know that that's been changing over a long period of time. Is it changing at an accelerated rate? And what might that new definition of accountancy look like? And dare I say, let me advertise now, of course there's the technical stuff. Of course there is. There always will be the technical stuff. But what about social and societal impacts of accountancy? What about morality within accountancy? And some of you might be thinking here in the Performing Arts Studio and online, what's he talking about? Accounting? That's about numbers. Why are you talking about societal and social impacts? Why are you referring to morality within accounting? So that's something that I think we can steer towards before we start our panel discussion. In terms of some quotes, which I've got there on the screen for you, a pretty obvious one: change. It happens. We know it happens. Of course it happens. I don't know, I often use it in meetings and sessions at work when we're always talking about change, and in lectures. The one constant in life is change. I'd give credit to whoever said that originally or wrote it. I don't know who it is. But yeah, the one constant in life is change. But I thought this was interesting from a book which really has got nothing to do with accounting. Published in 2007, the book is called 13 Reasons Why. You can't stop the future. You can't rewind the past. The only way to learn the secret is to press play. And I made reference to that when I said that Singapore has been particularly proactive in pressing that play button. And that's something that I think I'd recommend that we try and keep at the back of our minds as we go through these issues and insights, but again, I promise no answers. Let me start with some history. I like history. One of the things I did when I joined UCL, I had no excuse, I couldn't put it off anymore. Across the road was Birkbeck, part of the University of London. And when I was leaving school, I thought I wanted to be a history teacher. And I looked seriously at that, but I came from a background where we had no money. Going to study history for 3 years wasn't really an option, so I went into the accountancy profession. But I signed up for a master's in early modern history, which is great. If you don't like what I'm talking about, I can actually go off and tell you about the East India Trading Company. I can tell you about the repeal of the Witchcraft Act in England and Wales. I can do all that if you want to, but hopefully I won't have to. History about me. Many years ago, it seems like 1,000, maybe 1 million years ago, I studied to become an accountant. And I became an accountant. And I ended up working in the management accounting department of a supermarket company in the UK. And it was at the time, it was a large supermarket company, about 340 stores around the UK. It got taken over, then that company got taken over. It's disappeared somewhere, but the history of the supermarket company is there. And what was I doing? Every 4 weeks, we had 13 four-weekly periods. I'd go in on a Saturday and I'd prepare the management accounts. Spreadsheets, what were they? They were something that nobody had ever heard of. Over the weekend, the mainframe computer would run the accounts, and on the Monday morning, the board would have its board meeting and would look at the regional management accounts. I'd be asked to look at some variances, and it was fine. It was fine. And they paid me money. It was good money. I got to the point where I thought, is there more to life? And that's not to denigrate accounting, and I'll refer to modern accounting in a moment. Is there more to life? What prompted me to think there was more to life was sausages. One of the things I had to do every 3 months, every quarter, for the UK government's Office for the National Office for Statistics, I had to report on the weight and volume of processed sausages that the company had been involved in producing and selling. And that would feed into government data, which was published. I think it was sausages that, for me, was the straw that broke the camel's back. There comes a point where you say, yeah, I'll put up with the not very exciting nature of the work for a while. But when it got to the sausages, I just thought, this is the catalyst for me to look elsewhere. I come from a very large extended family. There are millions of us. We have an Irish heritage, and often there are large families there. One of my relatives has got offspring who is a management accountant in a supermarket company today. He doesn't deal with sausages. If you look at the nature of the work today in a supermarket company compared to when I was doing it, TVs, electronics, not just food and sausages like I had, insurance products, banking products, giving people loans, the range of activities is so much greater than the 1,000 years ago when I was working in accountancy. And he talks to me occasionally. We try not to be too sad about it in talking about management accounting, but we talk about things occasionally, and I reflect on how it's changed. And I say to him, what are some of the demands that impact upon you in your job now? Yes, of course, they do budgets and they do variance analysis on a periodic basis. He has to give advice to managers about making financial decisions. And the sorts of advice that he gives, not surprising, I'm going to say this, compared to 1,000 years ago when I was doing it, customer demands, consumer preferences, And he reports, and we know this, but let's say it for the record, he reports that those consumer preferences are changing rapidly. Consumers are becoming much more demanding. He has other things that he has to look at in terms of how much electrical energy, how much electrical power is consumed by the electronic products that they sell. TVs, tablets, computers. I mean, I don't think, apart from mainframe computers, when I was doing it, I don't think anybody had really thought more beyond the advent of something that they used to call microcomputers. He gets involved in thinking about sustainability. In more recent times, following November last year in Glasgow, in Scotland, when there was COP26, with people coming together from all around the world to look at the future about not just climate change, but including climate change. He's now having to look at that because, of course, if countries commit to doing things for climate change, but for in other areas as well, that means managers have to make different decisions. That means they need different data. That means they need different advice. So he's now involved in environmental matters. He's looking at governance matters along with some of the other accountants who he works with, not within the management accounting function, but associated with the management accounting function in that broad arena. And just by giving you that description, we can see already that accountancy has changed. Just jump into the future. You know, at the COP26 summit, they agreed deadlines, most agreed deadlines, some agreed commitments to attain deadlines. How's that going to happen? Unless you provide advice to managers, it's not going to happen, is it? It might happen, but it mightn't happen to the degree which they would like it to happen, or it might happen in a way which they didn't expect to happen, and thus not achieve the target. So I just give that as a backdrop in my own personal experience, how it's changed. And I remember New Year at a social event, I'll call it that, a social event. It was actually a party at my house. The police weren't called, I hasten to add. Well, I'll say no more. And we got talking about that. There we are at a social event at my house. Oh, actually, we were over in the corner. And we got talking about accountancy and management accountancy. And then he started telling me about some of the digital developments that are actually impacting his work. Of course, everybody just thought we were crazy because they're all having a good time and we're talking about accounting. But how technology has been impacting his business. And he's a member of an accountancy body. He goes to some of the local area events. And they're all talking about technology, the digital developments, how it's changing what they have to do, what they need to do, but also the work practices in the way in which they're doing things. And there's some of the themes that we'll start to explore today, looking at some of the issues and some of the insights into that arena. Some of you may, be it here or colleagues online, have seen, I think it's been going now, I don't know, it was the first one in about 2012. Every year there's an update of a video which you can find on social media called Shift Happens, and they update lots of data each year. It lasts about 4 minutes. If you haven't seen it, go and have a look at it. It's quite thought-provoking. And these quotes is from, I think it was the 2021 version. Maybe it's 2022. It might have straddled the year. But just the one thing that you see there, the top 10 jobs that were in demand in 2010 didn't exist in 2004. You know, just in 6 years, there was that change in the landscape. We need to prepare for jobs that don't yet exist. That's quite challenging, isn't it? If you don't know what the job's going to be, how can you actually prepare for it? We need, even if it's not the jobs, we need to prepare for the changes in our jobs. We need to try and predict what those changes are, even if it's not going to change our jobs completely. And I was quite taken by the final two quotes. There's just one part of this. What has it got here? Using technologies that have not yet been invented. And we can all do that by looking back. I mean, there are some people in this room, I'm sure, and online. There was a time when cell phones didn't exist. There was a time when there were cell phones, but they weren't smartphones. I mentioned the term microcomputers earlier on. I remember, not quite 1,000 years ago, but perhaps 900 years on the scale of things, going to an education symposium, and it was up in Edinburgh, in Scotland. I was working at an educational institution in London, and it was using microcomputers in education. And we all went along terribly excited because this was the future. And of course now, microcomputers, what's that? We know about the power of spreadsheets. We know about the growth of machine learning. We know about the growth and impact of artificial intelligence. But this is the one that caught me, the final bit. In order to solve problems that we don't even know are problems. And if I may recommend to you, as we look at these, as we identify these issues and consider the insights, and in our panel deliberations and exchanges, I think keep this at the back of your mind. That impact, I think, is quite significant. Anyway, for the moment, I've spoken enough. I can. I'm not sure if people online, if the eyes are going. I can see one or two sets of eyes going in this room. It's probably because you're in deep contemplation and reflection upon my pearls of wisdom. I understand that. Yeah. Notice how I have an excuse for most things. What I think we're now going to do, Ching-Wei, if we may, is I'd like to find out about you in the performing arts theatre, but also colleagues who are online. If you like, your demographics, are you involved in accounting, finance? If so, which arena? Are you involved in other things? What's impacting upon your lives in terms of digital developments, in terms of other things? I mentioned about my relative. Consumer preferences, are they changing the way in which we're working? And this would be just interesting for me to get an overview. Of course, we could have done 1,000 items, but we haven't, just to get a feel. And apart from that, to avoid eyes falling asleep, people are now looking at the screen and seeing things changing. See, I've thought about it. Yeah, so with those online and those in the theatre here today who've logged on, we're seeing, 37%, approaching 40% in the working in the accounting arena. But then we've got others, I don't know, maybe we've got people who are working in IT or marketing or HR. Finance, and so if we put the accounting and finance together, if I do some people have changed from accounting to finance, but if we put those together, so just over 50% of people are in the finance and accounting arena. We have general management, consultancy, product development, and so on. So that's useful for me because it gives me a view. We'll still talk about the same sorts of things that myself and my fellow panelists agreed we would emphasize as we go through this session. But I think that helps us tailor the direction in which to go. I think we have another one, Ching-Wei, there. If you are in accounting and finance, and I think we saw just over 50% of colleagues in the room and or online are in area. Do we have another one coming up here? Yeah, that's it. It's the word cloud. So just tell us what you're in. So we've got somebody in insolvency. Clearly have seen, you looked at my bank account. Somebody in audit, and if you look at it's not just somebody in audit, because those who have done this before will know the size of the word cloud reflects a number of people polling as well. Education, insolvency, public accounting. Now that's interesting. Retrocession. I thought that was just what people said to me when I go to parties in the clothes that I bought 30 years ago. If only they would fit. Arts, product control, full set of accounts. An interesting question maybe just to throw in towards the end today. If we talk about education, and I think we have to talk about education, what's happening in the workplace, what's happening in universities, what's happening in professional accountancy bodies, syllabi. We have to we have to look at that. Full set of accounts, interesting question, not for debate now. Those of you in the accounting and finance arena will know what I mean when I say the trial balance. Should we be teaching students all about the trial balance? You know, that's an interesting essay to set to students. Should we be teaching the trial balance? Discuss in 5,000 words. I mean, that would just be interesting. And you know what the answer is. It's the conventional and traditional answer that accountants give to all questions. The answer is yes, and the answer is no, because it all depends on your perspective and the context and the circumstances. So that's useful. That gives us something there. What else have we got? Now, whether you're in the accounting and finance arena or whether you're in any of those others that came up on the screen, digital developments, yeah, we know it's happening. And we've got so far, if that's everybody at once, oh no, we got 94 somewhat. I just wonder if we're going to get some colleagues who are going to tick the box which says, not much. Yeah, we have. We've got 3% at the moment. That's changing to 6%, but majority is around about 60%. But if you add that to the somewhat as well, at the moment, I think we're over 90%, 93%. And again, that just gives us a feel for the room, but also reminds us that if we just stop and think, I mean, we thought about putting this in, but we didn't want to get into too much technical detail. Imagine if a question had said, particularly if you've been working for, let's pick a number, 10 years, and we said, could you try and measure, if it's at all possible, the degree of change that's happened over a 10-year period? And I think that would give it a real relativity. So that's useful again. So, Ching Wei, please. If you trawl through all the stuff that's out there, research literature, reports from accountancy bodies, reports from accounting and consulting organizations, if you look at what's in the research literature coming out of universities and elsewhere, these seem to be the broad areas. Of course, there are lots of subsets out there, but AI and analytics, cloud computing, intelligent automation. Others, I think we had down below blockchain as well, which is just off the screen there. These are the things which are going on out there. I mean, we could have broadly put in as part of it fintech as well, and I'm sure some people would have used that as a, well, yes, there's fintech going on, and they would have pressed the button. And we might have seen blockchain as part of that coming on. Cyber security, yeah, it's happening. And what we're seeing here now is people who are here today, presumably because you're interested, and you're interested because this is actually, I would suggest you're interested because this is actually impacting upon you. I think we've got another one. So although we're not getting everybody able to respond, I think we're getting a good representative sample. But now, I mentioned about my relative, consumer preferences. The stakeholder base is broadening. We're getting a bigger stakeholder base, and we're getting more subsets within the stakeholder base. Changing client expectations, workforce challenges, changing public expectations, outsourcing, offshoring. Sometimes we might want to put the outsourcing and offshoring together, but I've deliberately separated them in terms of looking to other countries. Subcontracting there. And what's interesting is the first one. Gosh, I must go and do a lottery ticket. For once in my life, I did a bet. I thought it would be workforce challenges that would be the highest one. And again, with our panelists later on, how do we deal with that? We're scared of change. We don't like change. Not everybody, but there's this general, it means I've got to change. I've got to do things differently. Or is my job in danger? You know, that might be another reason why we don't like change. Changing client expectations. Go back to what I said about other stakeholders. Something we'll refer to in passing a little bit later on, or maybe not in passing. Are we going from a view of accountancy as focusing on shareholder value, shareholder capital, to a broader stakeholder value and stakeholder capital. And if we are, and there seems to be a lot of evidence out there that we are, then surely we have to be taking into consideration what you can see there with both the changing client expectations, but also changing public expectations. And I think, have we got, is it one or two more, Chingwei, I think? Yeah, I said, you know, change. We don't like change. We don't like change. Was it, I said I like history. I'll refer to England only on the basis that University of London and UCL, even though international and global. Was it 1812, 1813, when machinery entered the arena for weaving and making clothes? And people were losing their jobs. So there were riots in various parts of England, and those people were arrested. A little bit later on, new machinery came into farming. Now, both of those industries had traditionally been completed by hand. And then you had all this technology, because in those days, that was technology coming in and taking jobs. I think it was in the farming riots. By the way, in case you ever want to look at it, the ones who were very concerned, the people who were very concerned about the weaving industry, they became known as the Luddites. And in certain parts of the world, with English language, it's still used as, oh, you're a Luddite, because you don't want to accept the changes that arise from technology. And on the one for farming, forgive me, hundreds sent to Australia, because that was the choice where the British government used to send people. And was it, I can't remember, was it 13 or 18 executed? Executed for protesting about, you're taking our livelihood away. Just interesting. And we're scared about that. And we've got only 6% saying feeling threatened by changes out there. Now, we won't unpick this at the moment. We don't have time, but that would be interesting. Only 6% at the moment of those who responded saying they feel threatened a lot. Maybe that's because you're prepared for it. Maybe that's because it hasn't actually come onto your horizon yet. So that would just be interesting on another occasion to try and explore that. But we don't like change. And I think, we got one more, Chingwei, I think? Yeah, one more to go. And what skills would you need, do you think, to develop or acquire to help you change, to cope, to manage with all this change that's going on? So anything that you feel, put in a word, technology, coding. Yeah, so should accountants actually learn how to code? Interesting question. And you know the answer? The answer is yes, and the answer is no. It all depends on where they are and what they're doing. Data analytics, mathematics. Well, that leaves me out if it's mathematics. I'm so old in the UK, I didn't do a GCSE, which is what you do when you're 16. I did an O-level, and it took me 2 attempts to get my maths O-level. But look at the size of data analytics there. And again, if you look at some of the reports that are out there, what are they saying? There's lots of things that the accountants, both today and in the future, need to know about. And being able to manage data, to interpret the results of data. We see technology is quite large there. Not necessarily changing accountants into technologists, but understanding technology and how it can help them in their jobs, how it can improve their jobs, speed up their jobs, but also help them give better information because they have been able to interpret things better. So I think that's useful for me. Thank you so much. But also, hopefully, it's useful for you here in the theatre and those online, just to get a feel for the landscape that's out there. And I think making a YouTube video. We've got somebody there making a YouTube video. Lots of things you could do with making a YouTube. Getting a wife. That's interesting. We have a wide range of responses. Yeah, be calm. Yeah, be calm. That's probably a good one. Creative. I try and be calm. I don't think I could ever be creative. Thank you, Xingwei. Right, so we've got that. Shift happens. What have we got here? Just to finish off on the shift happens. What have I got here on this one? The water wheel. The water wheel was invented. People no longer had to carry water or dig channels to improve crops. Gosh, I don't know. Was that in Alexandria, in old Egypt, over 2,200 years ago? When that was, it changed the way things happened. It improved things, but people were scared. It's changing our jobs. And then the printing press. In the 11th century, you had in China the development of an early printing press, and then you had the Gutenberg press in, was it the 14th century, in Europe, changing the way in which things were done, but also the advantages that came from it. We have cars, automobiles. Run of the mill, isn't it? Cars. And now we have electric cars. When that came on, how that changed. Also, it changed manufacturing. Some of you will be familiar with Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford Motor Company, and the Model T Ford, the first standard mass-produced vehicle that there was. And then I spoke about microcomputers. That's not even a microcomputer. I think that photo was taken from the late 1960s. So for those of you who have never seen what a computer used to look like, that's what a computer used to look like. And all of that has caused change. All of it has been the consequence of change. The need for change. What's that saying? Necessity is the mother of invention. And we see that there. One of the problems we face now, however, is the rate at which change is happening, the uncertainty which is going on. And we speak about the VUCA world, the world which is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. How do we manage in a world that's like that? How do we respond to changing consumer preferences quickly when their preferences are changing quickly? How do we respond to public expectations as an accountancy profession when their expectations are changing quickly? And I saw a reference in an article recently where they went as far as to say that is the accountancy profession approaching the environment of the perfect storm, where everything is hitting at once. Later on, social and societal and morality. I'll pick my words very carefully here. The role of audit, not the role of auditors, but the role of audit and the expectations of what an audit function can do for us in terms of, yeah, look what this company's done. It's done things properly. Here are the results. This company is part of our pension trust fund, which is going to pay somebody's pension one day. We can rely on the fact it's going to be around in a few years' time. Or, again, not the auditors per se, but is the audit function doing what it's supposed to be doing? Is the aspiration there that they want to do what they're supposed to be doing, but maybe if there are elaborate frauds which are being constructed, how can even the best audit team in the universe see through the most elaborate frauds? We'll spend just a moment on that. I took this from, there's loads of reports out there. I had to be selective. So any professional accountancy body that I've missed out, apologies. You know, we could have been here till tomorrow. Maybe you're already thinking it's been 24 hours. I don't know. The accountants, the ACCA, one of their reports, I think this one was 2015, 2016. What's likely to have the highest impact? Development of intelligent automated accounting systems, not surprisingly. The rate of change and economic volatility, that accelerated change which is going on there. Greater harmonization of accounting and business standards, and that in itself has got a challenge, hasn't it? Because different parts of the world have their local and national cultures, you know. And are we hearing people in some parts of the world saying, particularly if I use the term Anglo-Saxon, that takes me back on the history track that I like, but yeah, oh, all this accounting, these are standards. They seem to have an Anglo-Saxon origin. Well, didn't you have a British Empire once? Are you trying to come back and bring us into another empire? That's quite interesting. I've had people say that, and there have been articles written on that. Cloud computing and different aspirations and expectations of coming generations. Spoke to my relative 1,000 years ago when I was doing it. I couldn't even dream of the things that he's been talking to me about in recent times. Whoops. Yeah. And the ACCA, again, there will be reference to other bodies shortly. ACCA, the different attributes. So this will tie into workplace development, but also potentially university education, possibly SIM education, in terms of experience. Experience tells the different range of experiences. Are we all going to be just siloed in one experience? When if everything is happening at once and everything is becoming interconnected, we need to have at least an appreciation of other things. Intelligence, something which, of course, I'm glad this came out now and not when I was studying to be an accountant, otherwise I'd never have got there. Intelligence, being able to spot things, see things, have the ability to understand things, to process things, being creative, being digital. Somebody actually put in coding earlier on, didn't they? But at least to have an awareness and an appreciation and understanding of how things work. I've got colleagues in the audience from UCL, my colleague Lindsay, my colleague Barry. When we teach financial accounting, and you do the ratios, which are important to help you understand financial statements and performance, there are other things. And we get students saying, do I have to learn the formula? And we say, no, and they smile. What you have to do is not learn a formula, you have to understand what goes into the calculation, why that goes into the calculation, why something doesn't go into the calculation, so that even if you're using a spreadsheet, when you press the button, you've got a better feel for what that number is trying to tell you. So, we need to have an appreciation, not necessarily be experts. Vision, that leaves me out again, but not everybody, I'm glad to say. And then also this emotional intelligence. As we need to deal with more people, as we need to interact with more people, we need to know ourselves, understand ourselves. We need to understand other people as well. And if you put that in the context of the changing landscape that I spoke about earlier, I think that even if there was nothing else, is going to be something that's particularly significant. Here's one taken from a Chartered Global Management Accountant body, which is a combination of AICPA and CIMA. I had the pleasure many years ago of working with Ralph Stacey, who developed this. And yeah, I quite like this one as well, in the to try and explain the influences on us, the pressures on us at the moment. Wouldn't it be great if everything was rational, in our comfort zone? Planning. It's easy, isn't it? Because it's predictable. You go back, let's say, to the 1950s. Yeah, strategic planning. The world was changing a bit, wasn't it, in the early 50s? There were still the after effects of Second World War. There were other wars that had been going on. But in the main, yeah, predictable. And then the world began to change. Those mainframe computers in the 60s. We start talking about another industrial revolution. We had the oil challenges in the early 1970s, which led to high inflation in many parts of the world in the 1970s. Of course, I'm too young to remember it, but I did have an uncle who's passed on to another universe since. He used to comment on 1976? 25% inflation in the UK. Yeah, 25%, it's incomprehensible, isn't it? But there are parts of the world today where we know inflation is particularly high. A student, Geraldine, mentioned about our MBA, UCL MBA with Peking University. And we were talking about inflation as part of a course a couple of years ago. And we mentioned places in the world which have high inflation. And that's not to criticize them, it's just to say they have high inflation. And somebody mentioned Zimbabwe. And one of our colleagues, they were the working managers, the students, dived into her bag. I was there 3 weeks ago. And she pulled out a 10 trillion Zimbabwean dollar note. So I jokingly said, 1 loaf of bread or 2? And she said, probably 2. Well, that was 3 weeks ago. Maybe it's changed. And again, that's not to be disparaging to Zimbabwe. It's just observing that there was high inflation there, and there still is. So wouldn't it be great if everything was rational? But then we get political, whether we're talking about governments, our national governments, whether we're talking about international politics, whether we're talking about internal politics in our organizations, internal politics within our environment of having to deal with other people. I've just been given the 10-minute warning sign. So I've already warned our colleagues that it needs. I'm a great football fan, a soccer fan. So no doubt the yellow card will be next, and then the red card. And then judgment changes things. People have different perspectives, they have different experiences, and it starts to become complex. It starts to become chaotic. So interesting question. Just think of what's happening in the world today. I mean, the rationality is gone, hasn't it? We know that's gone. We've got conflicts going on in the world. We've got supply chain problems going on in the world. Inflation in many countries is rising. What's that going to do? What's that going to do to interest rates? We've seen central banks raising interest rates. What's that going to do to the ability of companies to borrow money to invest? What's that going to do to consumers who might buy products and services? And you'll notice for a short while now, I haven't mentioned accountancy, but all of this stuff is impacting upon the accountancy profession. Looking at Singapore. Again, I don't want to go through all of this slide. It's there as a prompt to me and for you. 4 key drivers impacting the sector. 2 key technology trends, intelligent automation and cloud computing. And then mega trends, going back to what we had earlier on, and a number of people supported those ideas as being significant, changing public and client expectations, and again, what was at the top of that list that people put when I said press the button? Workforce challenges. So what the Singapore research is showing is what people in this room and people online are feeling as well. Some job roles, and you'll see that they're interrelated there. See, it says multiple functional tracks. In the good old days, function A, function B, function C, in a nice silo, contained. And you could put the lid on it, and occasionally you'd lift the lid off and people would pop their heads up. It's changed. We have the functions, but they're multifunctional now, and perhaps people developing attributes and characteristics, so they're not just in one box. They have to be able to perhaps dip their hand in other boxes, jump from one box to another box to be able to deal with this complex, perhaps chaotic world in which we live in. Ethical hackers. I mean, that's a nice broad umbrella turning, but financial forensics. 15 years ago, was the accountancy profession really involved in financial forensics in terms of hackers? I don't know. Possibly. But now, we worry about it. We see reports about hacking left, right, and centre. I won't ask, but it would be interesting to find out if anybody's had their credit card hacked, their bank account hacked. Don't need to respond here or online, but I wouldn't be at all surprised in the number of people that we have involved in this session. Somebody would be going, I'm not going to admit it, but yeah. The world is changing there. Environmental ESG, environmental, social and governance. That's stakeholder value, stakeholder capitalism. That's changed. We're having to take account of that now. I mentioned earlier about the societal and morality. That could feed into that harmonization. What else have we got here? If I go to move, there it is. Again, coming out of the work. And if you have access to the slides, you'll see all the wonderful bodies, including representatives on our panel here today, who've been involved in this. Strategic Thrust 1, and this is for Singapore, but hey, this is impacting the worldwide. It's just that Singapore, along with some other regions, has been embracing this. Embracing technology, investing in capability building for the industry, and of course that in itself would be linked to resilience. If you build the capability, then you've got the potential to build resilience. Nothing unexpected would ever happen, would it? We'd all be okay. What happened to businesses during lockdown? You know, all those plans that people had made, let's say up until December, I lose track, when was it? December 2019. And then look what had happened in parts of the world by March 2020. And then also, I think, for accountancy, uplifting the sector image. They're not grey trousers, they're black, but I've got a black shirt and a grey jacket. I could, just call it dark grey. I'm male. I'm over 27. Just a little bit. I'm white Anglo-Saxon. A few years ago, that was, in some parts of the world, that was what an accountant looked like. The world has changed. We need to be exciting. We need to show people that we count. Lots of recommendations there. Encourage adoption of emerging technologies, job redesign, adaptation to maintain that competitiveness and agility. Recruit from a wide range of talent, to get talent from supply sources. Education. Well, we need to have the talented people. We need to educate them. We need to let them know what's going on in the accountancy profession, what's impacting upon them. Before we started today, there was a video that was running talking about the relationship, expressing the relationship between University of London and SIM. And one of the students, who was actually a working parent, said, I just noted down two things. One is they said, I'm learning how to recalibrate my skills. And surely that's something that we have to be doing in the accountancy profession in light of everything I've mentioned. The other thing she said was, I need to unlearn things, relearn things, and then, of course, on top of that, learn other things as well. I said I get, a little bit serious about things in terms of the definition, which I'll get onto in a moment. We're worried about our jobs. All this technology going to take our jobs. All the evidence shows that, yes, there will be a change in the job profile. There'll be people who will see their jobs disappear, but there'll be opportunities which open up, particularly in terms of what you can see on the bottom, the final one there, about human judgment. With all this additional data, with people saying, I need help, the customers, the public expectations, everything's changing. You need to help me. So I think that's something else in accountancy that we'd need to look at. And I'm not going to go through that. You can have a glance at one or two of the bits there. The slides are available after the event. But just, without going into the detail, just look how complex it is. And a number of the things, very many of the things I've been referring to, are reflected in what you see there. If you like, although it's not shown as a roadmap, you could say that that's a roadmap for finance and accounting in the future. Let me finish off with changing definitions and leave you with some, I'll be thinking out loud, some rhetorical questions. So, go back to 1953, first came out in 1941, and the good news is we're almost there. For our colleagues about to give me the red card, we're almost there. The art of recording, classifying, summarizing in a significant manner money, transactions, and events, and interpreting the results thereof. You can all see that. You don't need me to read it to you. Let's move on to 1966. Accounting this is the American Accounting Association. Accounting is the process of identifying, measuring, and communicating economic information. That's interesting that they've actually used the term economic there to permit informed judgments and decisions by users of information. So I think there was a slight difference in the definition. And of course, what we've seen with subsequent definitions, more of a move towards non-financial information. And if we put that in the context of the changing expectations of society, maybe that should be the case. So what I want to leave you with is looking at Gary Carnegie. There are lots of reports and articles out there, but one in particular, Gary Carnegie, who has worked by himself. He's emeritus professor at RMIT in university in Australia at the moment. He's written with colleagues here, but also writes by himself. What he suggested is, along with his colleagues, that look at that definition. Accounting is a technical, social, and moral practice. We know it's technical. What are they on about? Social and moral? Concerned with the sustainable utilization of resources, think about COP26, and proper accountability to stakeholders, not just to shareholders. Not everybody agrees. Not everybody agrees. This is a proposed definition to enable the flourishing of organizations, people, and nature. We hear about people, planet, profit being merged together. We hear about integrated reporting. We've got sustainable development goals, which people are setting. And his view, and some of his colleagues, is that this is what we need to be aiming for. Think about accounting education. I mentioned the trial balance. Yeah? Possibly. The answer is yes. The answer is no. Should we still include it? Even if we do include it, I think there are many other things we should be including. The technical practice, how to do accounting, even I can do that. Social practice, what does accounting actually do beyond that technical stuff? And the moral practice, what should accounting do and what should accounting not do? And I'm just going to finish off, our colleague will be delighted to know that. Let me put this over here. I haven't got a script, but I wanted to remember the dates of one or two articles in newspapers, so I've noted them down here. So let's see what we've got here. Don't forget when you go to the supermarket to get some broccoli and some sweet corn. Sorry, it's the wrong, I better turn that over. I've got the wrong list out, yeah. Back in July 2020, in something called the Insurance Journal, two authors, Ellen Milligan and Hugo Miller, spoke about, and I don't necessarily agree with this for the purposes of we're being recorded, they spoke about what they saw as systemic problems in the audit function with some of the challenges and scandals that have emerged. I mean, we could go back beyond. Let's start with Enron and then work our way forward from Enron through to Wirecard, which some of you will be familiar with, both in Europe and the impact in Southeast Asia. Regulatory failures, allegedly, I'm not necessarily agreeing, of BaFin in Germany, the German regulator with Wirecard, and EY were the auditors who were saying it was such an elaborate fraud. In a way, what do you expect us to do about it? You know, if people deliberately set out to do those things, can we honestly be expected to always find everything? There was another one which came out of that one in the financial crash, interestingly, the impact of the financial crash on society. We know about the ratings agencies who very shortly before the financial crash had given top-notch ratings to all of these institutions, yeah? Auditors who'd signed things off. And just in this article, they're saying, what's it say here? Yeah, I just quoted it here, the impact on society. Who was actually subsequently imprisoned or fined in that world of checking? Just interesting. Again, I don't offer a view. It's not my job to offer a view. I have a view, but I'll keep quiet about it. And then there's been some comments about the Financial Reporting Council. Again, not my view. I report that some are saying, is it what you might refer to as being regulatory neutral? A number of people who have worked for the Big Four or the Big Six have left the Big Four and the Big Six, you know, because we all move on in our careers. And they work for the FRC. And some people are saying, does this mean that, you know, because there have been some challenges, and indeed we could describe some of them as scandals, associated with some auditing firms, not necessarily of their own doing, but public perception makes those associations, the perception is there. You know, is it demonstrating that they are regulatory, in regulatory terms, are they neutral? And I'll finish off now with, I'll go back to Gary Carnegie. In a paper that he wrote in April 2020, where it's called Redefining Accounting for Tomorrow. And right at the very end of the article, and by the way, it's worth a read, it's quite thought-provoking. And with credit to Gary Carnegie, I've paraphrased this final paragraph. Inculcating a broader map of a definition is what's required because it could have a significant impact. Accountancy can help us shape a better world for all. Let's not worry about risk. Let's seize the opportunity. And with that, I think with our esteemed and experienced, much more experienced than me, panelists, colleagues, I put that to you. May I thank you for not falling asleep. It's always a bonus, if not a surprise. And if you did fall asleep, at least it was worthwhile turning up because you caught up on your sleep. So everything is a bonus there. Thank you so much for your attention and consideration.
Thank you, Professor Parkinson, for your engaging delivery, which gives us much food for thought. Please take your seat on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to invite Associate Professor Lindsay Chew, Associate Professor in Accounting Education from the UCL School of Management, to chair the panel discussion. May I also invite Mr. Kon In Tong and Mr. Tan Lee Tong to join us on stage, please. Mr. Kon is the immediate past president of the Institute of Singapore Chartered Accountants, ISCAR, and a past president of the ASEAN Federation of Accountants. He is also an audit committee member of the Singapore Academy of Law and a member of the panel of financial experts with the Family Justice Cause. Mr. Tan has over 25 years of finance leadership experience. During his last held position with an US $1.5 billion MNC quartered in Singapore, he spearheaded the setting up of a centralized global treasury center and a multi-year finance transformation project across the Asia-Pacific. I'll hand the time over to you, Associate Professor Chew. Thank you.
That's on. Thank you very much, Geraldine. Thank you, audience members. And Alan, thank you very much for a very thought-provoking lecture. I think it definitely sets the scene for an interesting discussion this afternoon, and hopefully we'll be able to hear some different perspectives, indeed, from our two distinguished guests here on the panel. I think we're going to hand the floor over to our distinguished guests just to give their response in terms of what Alan had laid out for us to really consider, to really take forward as food for thought, and give their insights in terms of what's happening in their industries, in terms of their commercial experience, etc. So I think I'll go to In Tong first, if you'd like to give us your thoughts and your perspective.
Sorry. Thanks, Lindsay. So I took notes, right? So Alan, I took notes. I was a good student as instructed by Lindsay earlier. I just need to recognize my handwriting. Let's start with the definition of accounting. You put three definitions up there. To me, I'm not saying this lightly. I don't see the necessity for it. In a sense, it's a bit esoteric. I think it's good for academics and so on. If you look at what accountancy or accounting is, it's really an account of stewardship, recording of transactions to account for the stewardship. Obviously, stewardship changes over time, right? Everything we do translates into a financial impact, and every financial impact and data so recorded or produced and processed can then translate into actionable guidance, right? So in that sense, I don't think that has changed over the years since the Mesopotamian farmers first started to use accountancy. If we were to change the definition of accountancy or have a more fuller or up-to-date definition of accountancy, then I think as Professor Carnegie says, it's really to shape the behavior of accountants. I would agree with that, to shape the behavior of accountants and then measure the success or failures by those new definitions. Obviously, today, I think you mentioned about your relatives going from a I don't know, counting sausages to counting money, and now measuring environmental impact, right? I mean, same in Singapore. When Singapore first started to flourish, our wealth was built on commodities, and that's where the British East India Trading Company first started, right? And if you look at history, I think you probably agree with me. So we started with commodities. We measured, how commodities helped us. Then we moved to real estate banking. Today it's crypto and digital, right? So we've gone through the whole, if you like, the economic development and cycles of economic development without really changing the definitions of accountancy. I don't think it's broken per se. But if it can help to better the profession, then I think I would say then let's go for it. I mean, you talked about definitions being too slow, and you talked about a gradual move to non-financial information in accountancy. It's I mean, just to illustrate this point, the standard setters, the International Accounting Standards Board, the predecessor, IASC, started in 1973. It took them 50 years before they started introducing climate or sustainability disclosure standards, right? So they're moving slowly, but perhaps surely. Perhaps now's the right time to change those definitions. So in that sense, yes. You talked about preparing for jobs that don't exist when shift or shit happens. Sorry, you don't know what you don't know, right? You want to solve problems, you don't know what the problems are. I think today, if you try to focus too much on what those problems are in the future, or would be like in the future, in my opinion, probably barking up the wrong tree. The pace of change, you said earlier, the pace of change is so fast today. The data analytics, the technology, the coding skills we learn today could be obsolete tomorrow, right? So while it's good that we need to upskill, reskill, and learn new skills and so on to deal with current and future trends, and you mentioned a few, right? Like the future attributes for ACCA, the Stacey matrix, and so on. We can have a bit more discussion about that later. In terms of education, maybe not so much the knowledge, the skill sets, or the what we impart, but maybe look at the core competencies. We can come to this again. Accountants, at the end of the day, no matter what you do, no matter what role you play, we earn our living through exercising judgment and communicating that judgment. So if you think that that's important, that competency cuts across horizontally across all industries, whether it's medicine, accounting, legal, and so on, right? Then perhaps that's what universities should do. I mean, if you look at accountancy, if today the flavor of the month is data analytics, then so be it. We just focus on that. It will help, but if things changes, I think if you've got all these core competencies like critical thinking and so on, communication, you probably be more prepared to deal with the pace of change. So being agile, being nimble is probably important going forward for accountants anyway. So thank you.
Thank you again, Tom. Again, some more issues that I think are food for thought. So thank you for that. Li Tong, would you like to also offer your sort of thoughts on the matter?
Sure, thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Lindsay. I was actually, Prof. Allen was talking about counting for sausages, and there was no spreadsheet, right? I'm a bit luckier than you. I did start with spreadsheet. It was Lotus 123 at the time. Oh, well, it's not too bad. For those of you who have not heard of Lotus 123, I think it's not bad. It's a green screen. It's easy to use, but I'm sure right now everyone talks about spreadsheet and Excel. But I would, before we go into definition of accounting, change and all that, I'll just take a step back and look at, explore a little bit of some of the impact on an accountant. And in my journey of almost now 30 years in accountancy, there's a lot of changes. Life was great when there was no email, when there's only faxes, and I can choose when to read it, and no one knows whether I read it or not. But now, there's no way we can hide. So the pace is very different. And as we go along, I think when I was studying accountancy, it was all about historical accounting, right? There was no fair valuing. There's no need judgment, right? Okay, some judgment, but the thing is that it's a lot about historical. It's not so much on forward-looking. And as I went in through my career, sometime I think, I can't remember exactly when, was about, I think, 2010 onwards, then we started to have all this fair valuing, mark-to-market. And suddenly the historical accounting is totally gone, right? You're now going to fair valuing, and you created a new professional valuers with certification, with a lot of judgment in there, right? So that has changed drastically. And now, when you look at the balance sheet and the P&L, there's a lot of judgment in there. There's a lot of forward-looking assumptions, and you got to use it to tell, is the company making a profit? How's the balance sheet like? But there's a lot of numbers that people may not, an ordinary person, shareholders, may not actually understand some of the terminology in there. So I think, but for accountant, coming from my era of historical accounting, I have to adapt to the new way of looking at financials accounting. And of course, today, since 2020 pandemic, I think things has just accelerated so fast. I think In Tong talked about acceleration. So now, today, as we sit here, we are facing with geopolitical issues. We have got the pandemic, it's still there. And of course, Great Resignation. We hear about Great Resignation. And we can explore a little bit there. Why Great Resignation? Is it impacting the accountants? Is it impacting the auditors? I've heard different views on that. We can discuss about that. And hybrid working, talking about change. 2 years ago, who dare say that you can work totally 100% at home? Would anyone dare to do that? And do people want to do that? And people may resist the change. But if you're forced into that change, now, the problem with employer is the employees are not coming back again, right? Everyone is saying, no, I'm not going back. I think I like my lifestyle now. The employer will say, let's do 2 days, 3 days, kind of, So everyone is still trying to adapt. And of course, during these 2 years as well, the digital has accelerated. And how is it impacting us as accountants? And let me quote you one example. My wife is an accountant as well, and she actually graduated from RMIT SIM. So in the past, I dread weekends. And you know why? I have to drive her to the market to buy fishes and things like that. I don't like fish. I hate fish. And she comes from a fish family, so she loves it, and I don't like it. But during the pandemic, things changed. She now buys fishes online, delivered to our house in nicely packed boxes, and I don't have to touch anything. And it's just, the moment I see it, it's already on the table, ready to eat. So things have changed drastically, and life is actually better. And to me, that digital transformation or acceleration for her and for me is that it just makes it so much easier. And today, I think everyone is so relying on your social media or your Facebook or even your digital devices. And I think you'd rather lose your IC than your handphone today. If you lost your mobile phone, you will be more worried, right? So I think things have changed so much. And all this has also prompted businesses to change the way they engage, the way they run their operation, the way they engage customers. And with that, also the expectation of the role of a CFO, of an accountant, has changed drastically. Accountants these days are no longer seen as someone who keeps a record, measure it, report it for regulatory or for tax or whatever. Accountants, CFOs, are seen as a business partner to really be there. And I think Prof. Alan talked about being there, looking at data and advising the management and where to sell, how much to sell, and all that. I think it's more than that. So there's a change there. And of course, with digitalization, it also changes the whole way that accountants are operating. And one quick example here is that when I joined Workday, my current company, which is in finance, ERP, and HR, cloud accounting, when I joined them, I asked, so can I meet the finance team in Singapore, or the HR team for that matter? To my surprise, there isn't anyone sitting in Singapore doing the accounting itself. is all somewhere else. So it's either in the cloud, and we talk about job shifting as well. So the world has changed. Like it or not, it has changed. And so there's a lot of things. The automation is already happening. Intelligent automation is happening. And data, we're talking about it. So the way that if we were to stay relevant, if you're a student today, I think you are learning a lot of new things, which is good. If you are like me, who studied 30 years ago or 20 years ago, we just have to progress with time, because the whole digitalization has changed the way that things are being run, and as accountant, we have to change the way that we operate and we support the business. And of course, now with ESG and the demographic and the gig economy coming into play, the way the accountant can work, you can be here in Singapore, you can be working with someone for someone elsewhere, and vice versa as well. So that actually opens up a lot of opportunity for us to really expand our horizon. But what I think the most important as a parting remark is, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the mindset and your attitude. If you have the mindset and attitude that change is coming, I'm going to change, and I proactively go for it, then I think we will continue to be relevant and value adding to whoever we are working for.
Thank you, Linton. So we've heard mentioning of sausages and fish this afternoon. So it's a great time to talk about food. I'm Malaysian heritage, so therefore that's very relevant to me. Thank you very much for your sort of insight in terms of what you see as the upcoming challenges for the future of the profession. But indeed, I think it applies to many other professions as well. So those tuning in today, maybe perhaps not from an accounting and finance background, I think it's highly relevant for us to be considering what our futures are going to be like, regardless of the vocation that you're choosing to sort of go into, choosing a university course or a short course, or professional development. All of these attributes that you've mentioned do stretch right across all industries and all sectors. I'd like to kind of talk about Intong, you mentioned those quotients that Alan put up on the screen, and sort of thinking about the agile nature of the future generation and how they should be prepared to be adaptable. Would you like to sort of expand a little bit more? Do you think that the people coming out from university now have those skills, or is there more that they need to be doing?
Yeah, so another of Alan's slides, I think he had one or two slides on challenges, right? And he had a Slido poll question on challenges as well. 30 years ago when I started in the profession, if you ask my bosses, what is the biggest challenge you face, right, in the profession? The top three, you say people, people, people. Today, if you ask the same question, I bet you it's people, 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 right? So the challenges are not new. We adapted. We survived. I started with Kalamazoo systems, right? So you may not, I don't look that old, but I trained with handwritten ledgers and books. Okay, so I survived. I adapted, right? So what was the reason for me still being in the business? I think forbearance and perseverance are key if you want longevity in anything you do, right? It's not just accounting, anything you do. I think forbearance and perseverance are key in the professions. I think we had this conversation over lunch yesterday, when we were talking about what should we teach our students, right? It's like driving a car out of the showroom. I think the day you drive the car out of the showroom, it becomes obsolete. It's the same thing with education. I think in particular university education. Singapore university education is a bit different. I trained in the UK. I studied in the UK. I mean, surprisingly enough, my grades weren't good enough to go to a local U, so I had to go overseas, right? So in Singapore, they train the students to join the workforce hitting the ground running, which is good for Singapore. I think in the 60s and the 70s, when Singapore's developing, we need workers, we need people in the production lines, we need people, the engineers, supervisors, and so on. So that was good. That was great for Singapore. I think UK, even in the 60s or 70s, was a bit more developed. I mean, after all, the Industrial Revolution started in the UK, right? More than 200 over years ago. So what does the UK teach university students to do? They teach them how to think. They teach them to seek the truth. Maybe today we should tell them to tell the truth. So maybe a lot of ethical competencies, training, and so on needs to be, I suppose, in the syllabus or in the curriculum somehow. So the core competencies I talked about, critical thinking. It's not just connecting the dots, right? It's just weighing the pros and cons, for example, and then making a decision. The communication skills, you can exercise great critical thinking, you can exercise great judgment, but if you can't communicate that, I think more than half the battle is lost. So we need these sort of core competencies, not just for accountants. I think if you want to be prepared for the future world where you need to explain, you need to justify, you need to rally, you need to get things moving, I think those core competencies have stood the test of time. I don't think they will go out of date. Today, you talk about double entry, right? Trial balances. Okay, maybe trial balances. I think trial balances still exist, right? Unfortunately, you can't get away. So it's not changed since the Italian days, right? What else can we do to sort of help cushion the impact of pace of change? I suppose being agile, being nimble. I think suffering some hardship helps as well. I don't know whether, I think Ellen, you grew up in more difficult times than me or even Lindsay, right? So I think suffering hardships help a bit. Sometimes I wish our youngsters would sort of take the bull by the horns a bit better. But I think it's quite different today. I mean, there's no loyalty and so on. So I don't know whether maybe loyalty is one of the things we need. Even longevity, then loyalty to the profession, not to the firm or individual. I think loyalty to the profession will help as well. I don't know, I'm just rambling on, but.
Thank you. Actually, an interesting point on sort of thinking about emotional intelligence, so dealing with other people and perhaps not having quite as much interaction with people over the last sort of couple of years. But resilience is definitely something that in higher education we've been talking about quite a lot in terms of how do we instill resilience within our future graduates? How do we actually build that into the sort of the curriculum? Indeed.
Can you teach that?
Sorry, can we teach? Indeed, that is one of the big questions, one of the debates. Can you teach resilience? I wonder, Alan, what are your sort of thoughts in terms of from the education arena, whether that's possible?
Well, so when one's being interviewed and somebody asks you a question, of course, what you always do is you repeat the question because that leads neatly into the right phrasing and inflection in your response. So you've said, can you teach resilience? I'll give you the answer I gave when I was standing there earlier on. The answer is yes, and the answer is no. I think it all depends. So we're back to definitions. What do we mean by resilience? If we don't know what we mean by something, an idea, then we can't teach it. We can explore it. So I think the challenge there in resilience is, what do we mean by resilience? So we use it every day, and well, not every day, we use it frequently in language, don't we? We must be more resilient. And we've all got a feeling of what we mean by that. But I don't know, we'd have to perhaps go onto a dictionary perhaps on the screen. What is resilience? And is a bit like beauty. With my face, I could never really mention the term beauty, but it's like that saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Some people see beauty in one person's face and other people say, ugliest face I've ever seen. And I think resilience is the same. Different people, depending upon the angle they're looking at things from, their experiences, their context, will see different meanings within resilience. So hence, my get-out clause is the answer is yes and the answer is no. But I don't know, with anything, don't we, I mentioned the term explore it. Anything, when we're a little bit uncertain, what do we do in life? We explore it, and it's through those explorations that we start to shape what the definition may be. And if I might, Lindsay, just to go back to Ying Tong's points there about disagreeing, not with my definition, of course, I hasten to add, but Gary Carnegie's suggestions. I don't think that's too far away. I mean, you mentioned the word stewardship, and I think what's certainly implicit within that definition that I put on the screen at the end is it's stewardship of resources. Now, the traditional view of accounting is it's stewardship of the shareholders' resources. But if we do have some, at least vague agreement that maybe there needs to be a more social and societal degree of stakeholder capitalism, I think it's stewardship of resources there. You also mentioned about providing judgment and communicating that judgment. So maybe if we unpick that, maybe there are more challenges, more areas that the accountants will have to provide judgment on. And there are different ways of communicating that judgment now. So I think we're saying the same things. I think it's the level that we would go to, how far do we want to break it down? And then where you were talking about the impact upon what's happening in the workplace and education, I think the knock-on effect then is, well, you know, if we have to still have stewardship, but perhaps of different things, a wider base for stewardship, you know, what is that? How do we develop the ability to exercise judgment? Because again, if you look at all the reports on digital developments and artificial intelligence and machine learning and the robots taking our jobs and all the rest of it, there still is that space for, do they have the insight that humans have in order to be able to take the analysis that's already been done and then communicate what the outcome of that analysis actually means? So I actually think between the three of us, I think we're saying the same things. I think we're just looking at it from slightly different angles.
Thanks, Alan. Lee Song, actually, I want to come back to you. And you mentioned as part of some of the challenges that you're facing is the workforce challenge. So Ian Tong was also saying that people are not the problem, but they are one of the greatest assets and liabilities possibly. But that is something that you're perhaps a little bit anxious about in the future. How are you going to be sort of addressing some of those challenges that you foresee coming?
I think first thing first is we need to overcome the hurdle of that change. Okay, because I think technology is always going to make life better and easier for us. Take for example, I don't know whether you still teach it in school in accountancy today, but when I was learning my trial balance, the GL, I had to learn something called reconciliation, right? Is that something really that as an accountant you enjoy doing? Is it something that you think will advance your career? It is important, but it is not really something fun. And what if I tell you that with technology today, you don't have to do that anymore? For someone who has been doing it for 30 years, maybe they say, then what is going to happen to my job? I've been doing reconciling for my 30 years, and that's the only thing I know. And don't take away my spreadsheet. That's my livelihood. So technology, for sure is going to make it easier, or you take away that. And if your mindset is not tuned to change that, it's going to help me do something more meaningful, that is going to really help me to be in terms of my lifestyle, my profession, or even a better person, then I think it's going to be difficult. So you have to overcome yourself first. Once you overcome that, I can assure you, just like today, when was the last time you go to a bank? You don't go to bank anymore. You do it on your own. What if I tell you, for some accountants on the call, are you able to, if your CFO asks you, what's my bank balance globally? 70 countries across 100 legal entities. Are you able to tell them, or do you need spreadsheets to tell them? But if you embrace technology, you probably will be able to just sit here, sit there in your where you are right now, and then take out your mobile phone, and you are able to tell how much cash balances do you have around the world right now. So that has changed. but are you prepared for it? So I think that comes back to the mindset.
Definitely. I think that's good advice, actually, to overcome yourself first. Have that confidence, have that being comfortable with technology. In fact, it was one of those 3 strategic thrusts to embrace technology, definitely. Talking of technology, we're now going to also ask perhaps Geraldine to introduce the next segment for us. Again, I'm conscious of time, but Geraldine, if you'd like to guide the audience, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, now we would like to invite your views and move into the Q&A segment. You may now key in the event code #SIMUOL at slido.com and post your questions and comments. To allow for maximum participation, it would help if your questions are brief and precise. Associate Professor Chu will refer to the questions sent via slido.com in curating the flow of the dialogue during this Q&A segment.
Thank you, Geraldine. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of multitasking and working with technology. I'm embracing things. So just looking at some of the questions that have come in from the audience, both online and in the lecture theatre today, I can see that there is actually quite a number of different areas that people are very interested in. Thoughts that I think have been provoked by what you have been saying this afternoon today. So let's have a look at some of these and perhaps look at that first one. This is an interesting one. So this is asking, will you still encourage your children or relatives to pursue accounting as a profession? Who'd like to
Can
try
I
that
start?
one?
And you know what the answer is. The answer is yes, and the answer is no, because it all depends. It's not clear cut, because of course the people dimension. You would want to know what your children's aspirations are, what their talents are. I have 4 children. They're grown up. I know you're looking at me thinking, how can he have 4 grown-up children? I understand that. And I've got 2 very small grandsons. So if going back when it was career time for my 4 children, I mentioned accountancy. They had seen me as an accountant, then going into accounting education. The answer was clear. I was actually trying to put a positive spin on it to encourage them, but for a whole variety of reasons, they really didn't want to know. And then maybe that's because they'd seen me performing in an accounting arena. But if we just focus on the accounting profession, subject, of course, to preferences and attributes and characteristics of the individual child that you're referring to, I think I would put it certainly as, here is something that could lead to a worthwhile career. What do I mean by worthwhile? Interesting. It's not just about reporting on sausages anymore. It's something that is certainly interesting. It's something that brings you challenges. And if you're the sort of person who responds to challenges and embraces challenges, I think the accountancy profession is certainly going to do that for you today. I think in a number of parts of the world, if you look at be it the mean or the median salary of professionally qualified accountants, perhaps compared to some other careers, in financial terms, as well as the challenges and the job satisfaction, an accountancy career could bring some financial rewards as well. So again, perhaps you see why the answer is yes, the answer is no. I think I would, with my time again, I think I would still say, think about it. Think about it seriously. And if you want to ask me questions, I can give you insights. And of course, there are other arena that you can go into to find out answers to questions. That's my view, but maybe I'm biased.
Thank you, Alan. We'll see if the bias is on the rest of the panel, actually. Li Tong, what's your opinion?
I can take this because I've got exactly right now, I have one daughter taking O-level, and she's contemplating what course to take. And she told me the other night, it never came out before, and she told me that she wanted to take accountancy. I almost dropped off my chair. I've never thought of her as, someone who is going to take on accountancy. So I asked her why. And then she told me, that my brother, so his uncle, is an accountant. My wife is an accountant. I'm an accountant. And so to her, there's so many accountants in the family. So to her, it's like, and the conversations that we talk about, we don't talk about accountancy, we talk about maybe investments, right? Things like more interesting. And so I actually encourage her. I say, yeah, just go for it if you want to do it, because I had to help her write a 600-letter passage to get admission into her course. I don't know what was it. So we guided her. But I would say that accountancy is a very, very good foundation. Even you're not going to be an accountant when you graduate. And actually, within my own cohort, there are very few who are now practicing accountants or auditors. There's no auditor anymore. For my cohort, most of them are already out, only a handful, but most are also not in accountancy anymore. They are doing sales, they are doing operations. But what I can say here is that accountancy gives you a very good foundation, because financial literacy is something that it's something that once you gain it, you can actually excel in whatever that you do. Because at the end of the day, whatever you do in any corporate, you will have a department called finance department. And you want to be able to know how they think, right? You want to ask for budget. You want to ask for more money. You want to spend, right? You need to know how this accountant think. Then you can spin a story for them, right? To get your money or to get your investment. So I would say that certainly I would encourage it as a basic foundation for you. And certainly you may or may not end up as an auditor accountant, but that doesn't really matter.
Thank you. So sort of thinking about the other skills that you can develop as part of that profession. Yintong, do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there are probably two questions in that question. Accountants will never be out of a job. Okay? You may not like what you're doing, but you'll never be out of a job. I think that was true 30 years ago, it's true today. You talk about reconciliations, right, Lee Tong? Yeah, I mean, it makes technology, AI, data analytics make your job easier. Right? Instead of doing reconciliations, now you just review them and make a decision. Isn't that wonderful? You don't have to go through the grind and all that, right? So you got an easy life. The other thing about accountancy today is that it's kind of becoming less attractive, right? In the sense that, you still got a demand for accountants, the firms will still be there. And if you've got less competition, then your chances of success are higher. Has to be, right? I mean, if you look at basic demand supply, so you won't be out of a job as well, because we talk about. I think many people have talked about the Oxford studies and all the other studies around the world. Talk about accountancy being obsolete or replaced by robots or machines, right? I think they're really talking about the bookkeepers, whereas routine, low level, no thinking or not much thinking required, where machines can do it more accurately and faster, right? But so at the low level, yeah, jobs displacement is very high. But at the accountants level, higher end accountants, I think maybe some skills displacement, you may have to learn a bit of data analytics or appreciate them a bit more. But I don't think that can really be a good thing. It will make your job easier, right? If there's less competition, I think your chances of success are higher. So that can only be a good thing. Unfortunately, both my boys, one of them is a lawyer, one's a doctor. So that time has passed.
But still in one of the big professions. They're going to just say that I think also we have to put at the backdrop to that question is what is the perception of accounting as well. And I'm just reminded of something I didn't say when I mentioned about my 4 children. One of my children, when I said, have you thought about accountancy? They said words to the effect, I want to do something interesting. So in a sense, there's a perception there. And I think we're converted. We know accounting is interesting. It's challenging. It's interesting for that reason. I think if you're being educated in accounting or you're providing education, what we know is actually, and please don't snigger too much, those of you who are in a different arena, accounting is actually philosophically interesting and stimulating, because there's that whole underpinning of the theories that underpin it. But they did say, no, I want to do something interesting. So I think the perception is out there as well.
Can I just follow on what Alan just said? Talk about interesting. Youngsters today, the young kids, children, They want to do something that's meaningful, purposeful, and so on. I mean, obviously the skills in accountancy are transportable and portable and so on. But if you can tell the world what your carbon footprint is, whether you're paying enough taxes, whether you measure up to ESG goals, whether you're contributing to social causes, whether you're financially and socially responsible, I think that's very meaningful, right? So hopefully the youngsters will find purpose in accountancy. Obviously today, I see some of the corporates today asking their accountants, what is my contribution to the supply chain in respect of sanctioned Russian entities and organizations, right? So, wow, isn't that great?
Definitely. I think also on sort of thinking about how the role of the accountant is changing, is expanding, do you think that there is room for other skills such as very specific skills like coding? Do you think that that's one of the questions, if I can put that up on screen? Should we sort of be including coding as part of the accounting, what they learn to be accountants? So do we think that coding should be coding? Yes, not just being able to deal with data analytics, but actually the coding that goes behind. Do you think that's a skill set that the future of the accounting profession should have as part of that?
I'm not sure why you mentioned coding, because coming from where I am now, it is all about how you can do accounting without needing to know coding. So if you are thinking about coding, then I think in the legacy kind of technologies, yes, coding might be interesting, but I would say that in today, do you need to understand coding in any of the application that you use on your phone? Do you need to? I don't think so. Right? Everything is so user-friendly. You don't need to get trained to know how to use an app. You just use it. And that should be the future of even for the the systems of the future for accounting. That should be what you're looking forward. Shouldn't have coding. What I think, of course, there's a lot of mention about data analytics, data scientists. That's all good and fun. But at the end of the day, I would say one skill that is very important, we saw communication earlier on, but there's another skill, is storytelling. The data can be the best data, you know exactly how it leads to, but if you can't tell a good story, like someone doing a TED Talk, no one is going to buy a story, no one is going to make a good decision. So knowing data is great, but knowing how to tell a good story is even better. And that, from a career advancement, people who can tell story are the one who actually will have a much better career path than people who are going to be doing coding or doing data analytics and pass it on to someone who tells a story. I think that's the reality.
I agree entirely with Lee Tong. I agree with him. I don't agree with coding. I don't think it's necessary to be a good accountant. If you have heard of the T-shaped professional, T-shaped lawyer, T-shaped accountant, T-shaped whatever, doctor, and so on, you're very good at a broad range of things, but you're so excellent in one or two of them. That's what the accountants need to do. So if you are good at accounting and something else, and maybe even excellent in HR, it makes you a bit more resilient, makes you a bit more marketable, and so on. It's always good to I suppose, have more skills rather than less at the end of the day, because you just make yourself more valuable in that sense. I think accountants have a big capacity for learning because by nature of the training. So it helps if you have more skills.
When you said the T-shaped accountant, for those who have studied accountancy, I thought you were going to say T accounts, which would take us back, wouldn't it, for some of us? Yeah.
I'm just looking through some of these questions actually from the audience, and a lot of the areas that we've touched on as part of the responses do in fact answer some of these questions. I was trying to frantically find one that's a new sort of angle on things. I think perhaps maybe this one, talking about education. So I think at the beginning, Alan, you sort of mentioned that the sphere of education is changing, and I think in the workplace, employers are now expecting, in fact, lifelong learning to be part of the individuals that come to join organisations. So this question is, does postgraduate kind of education, is it still relevant given the pace of change and I guess the expectations of employers as well?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there about lifelong learning. I mean, here it's focusing specifically on postgraduate education. So let's just focus in on that for a moment. So postgraduate education, is it still relevant? It's relevant if the education that's being delivered in terms of the scope and the content, coupled with the delivery mode as well, and the challenges that you put to students, I think it is relevant. One of the any postgraduate education may well comprise a number of components. Now, one of those components could be technical detail, and it's that technical detail which I think could change quite dramatically. But postgraduate education, are we put the technical stuff over there for a moment? Are we trying to help our postgraduate students be, let's look at management, be better managers, be better thinkers? We saw critical analytical skills up there, coming out of silos and being able to go into other pots and communicate with other people, develop those critical skills, the communication skills. I think the technical stuff might well change, but the other aspects I think will be there. And to me, that's what part of postgraduate education is about. Yes, of course, there's technical stuff. As that technical stuff changes, let's change the technical content to keep up to at least try to keep up with the changes that are taking place. But the other things I think will still be there.
And Yin Tong, your perspective on the type of education that we should be providing the future leaders of organisations. What are your thoughts on the type of education? Short courses, postgrad courses, undergrad? Where do you see this heading?
You know, I think not, when COVID started, micro-credentials was the kind of the rage in the education circles, right? You know, it's not a 3-year degree course, but because it's expensive in the UK now, I think it's quite expensive in the US as well. So they talk about micro-credentials. That's okay because it is you get it in small bites. It sort of responds a bit faster to the needs of the profession, the needs of the industry and economy and so on. If you ask me if you need a 3-year program for accountancy, I would say leave the training of accountants to the professional bodies and the firms, right, to the profession, to the industry. Accountancy graduates, you know, maybe you teach them to deal with large amounts of data. You teach them how to interpret data, and all those sort of, you know, competencies that are portable across other industries as well. That may help to sort of, you know, reduce unemployment rate of whatever it is, wherever it is, right? Or allow the graduates to be employed a bit faster, provided employers and businesses are like-minded. Because I think in Singapore, I mentioned earlier, you know, we want people to sort of hit the ground running. Therefore, you know, that they're good at what they do. Sometimes they don't have the extra spark. No, they don't have that, you know, X factor that is needed for them to excel or to go further. And not to say that they're not doing well, but if you really want to be the top of the game, you probably need a bit of the X factor. And if you can sort of, you know, teach our guys to have that X factor, I don't know what that is. It's probably a combination of many things, right? I think that would be good. So general education is probably the way to go, yeah, rather than specific, you know, industry type of accountancy education in university.
Lisa, I can see you nodding. Are you in total agreement? Do you have a...
Yeah, I think having that foundation is important. And I agree with Ying Tong, leave the professional bodies on the updates of all the new things that comes along. But what I would say that the real training on technical stuff, a lot of things as we go along, technology will do a lot of the technical stuff anyway. What I learned as an accountant over the years and still learning now is how to deal with people, the politics, external, internal, with customers, with supplier, and things are just getting more complicated. Talking to banks, doing an M&A, talking to a tax person, right? Dealing with a supplier, talking to the customer around ESG. So all this requires a different kind of a skill set and mindset, and it's nothing technical. It's just how you communicate. So I think it's getting out there and learn all this stuff, and the technical stuff, it will come along. And at some point in time, as you become a leader and you have got a team, then you will be able to also have teams that are specialized in different things. But and of course, industry by industry, we have got different kind of peculiarity in there. So I don't think any education can teach you every single thing. So leave it to when it comes along. Let the professional body goes in bit sizes, and it's lifelong learning as we talk about it, right? So just keep going, and there's blockchain today, there's something else tomorrow, and metaverse next. How do you account for it? If you have a property in the metaverse, how do you account it on a balance sheet? I got no idea. So someone will come up with it, I'm sure.
Thank you. I'd like to perhaps ask our panelists today to take a moment, and a lot of the issues that we've sort of discussed today is very thought-provoking. What would your sort of advice be for those who are going to enter the market either very soon or over the next couple of years? Where do you sort of see the profession heading over the next 10 years, which they will be in their prime at that moment? What are the kind of things would you say now as pieces of advice? What would you impart to them? Alan, would you like to go first?
Of course, there are many things. You know, it's a non-exclusive list which could go on forever.
I'll have to limit you, I think.
Yeah, but we have to be away by midnight, so I won't go through that. I think I would highlight and emphasize the ability to be adaptable and agile, and not to think that it just stays the same, because we know it's not going to stay the same. You mentioned 10 years. You've only got to look what's happened over the past 10 years to all sorts, so to industry, to societies, to organizations, and the impact upon a whole range of professions, not just accountancy. There's no reason to expect that that's going to change, except that the rate of change is likely to change, and therefore be adaptable, be agile, have an open mind. Something I finished with, seize the opportunity. Don't be afraid of it. Is the glass half empty? Terrible. Or is it half full? That there's something there that we can build upon.
Thank you. Yin Tong?
Yeah, I mean, accountants inspire trust and confidence, right? Or at least that's what we're supposed to do. Whether you're an auditor or a finance director, we inspire trust and confidence, and therefore, by definition, by default, we are leaders in our own right. I mean, to be a good leader, perhaps really, there are some things that are indispensable to leadership, and one of them is learning. Okay, if you don't keep on learning, you'll be hoodwinked. You'll be people run rings around you, and you may not be an effective leader. So keep on learning. That's one. Two, accountants seek the truth, and therefore we have our value in telling the truth, right? So make sure your ethical standards are there, up there, top notch, and then you can continue to be relevant, because I mean, we are leaders, we inspire trust and confidence, but once we lose that trust, it's pretty difficult to get it back. So maybe keep on learning and be ethical.
Wonderful. And Li Tong?
Yeah, so I think if I think back my 30 years of journey, lots of things. But if you try to drill down, like any accountant would drill down, right? There are only a few good decisions that I made that brought me to where I am today. And of course, if you would ask me, if I go back to those exact time again, like time machine going back, would I make the same decision? Probably I'll still do the same. And so it comes back to the kind of like when you go out, you have to have a sort of an idea, a goal of where you want to go in the short term, and this will change. But what is important is to find a great mentor to help you with some of this decision making as you go along the way. If you make the right decision at certain critical juncture, which you will not know at that point in time, but when you think back, that's probably the best decision. But find a good mentor, and I had one or two mentors in the past, and not all mentors are good. Mentors that are they are not mentors. I would say that they are bosses, right? Not all bosses are good, but from the not so good bosses, you will learn how to be a better boss, and learn from there. And that's where you learn resilience as well, right? And how to be a better leader when you become a manager. So I would say that find a mentor when you get out, when you have a chance, and try to make right decision at certain juncture of your career. The first few years is very important, and that first few years will lay a lot of foundation for the later years.
Thank you, and I think very wise words from our panel. Just kind of looping back actually to wrap things up. Going back to the Slido voting that we had at the start that Alan led, just kind of bringing together some of those statistics, some of the 96% of us, I think, or at least of those who voted, said that they are impacted by digital developments. I think we've heard that the profession itself is changing. It's becoming embracing of technologies. And I think having the open-mindedness and the ability to feel confident to do that is so important for our future leaders. The workforce challenges, I think, over about 70% of respondents actually said that workforce challenges, so they definitely, concur with what you were saying today as well. And data analytics was the biggest bubble that came up. And I think when someone asked about coding, perhaps they were looking at data analytics. But definitely, having that skill set, having that confidence, having the agileness, the adaptability to always continue learning, lifelong learning through micro-credentials, through other types of educational outlets is definitely, I think, that all of us would endorse. And the fact that you're tuning in today and sitting here with us, I think you're of the same mindset as well. We don't profess to offer concrete answers to some of these questions that have been posed today, but it definitely gives us food for thought. And as those providing education to that future, I think it helps us to develop courses, to develop curricula that will help to satisfy what the employers are looking for, and hopefully what the future leaders are sort of looking for as well. Alan, would you like to?
Yeah, just the biggest bubble was data analytics, and I'm just jumped back into my mind. I'm conscious, that's a bonus, I'm not always conscious, conscious that I saw relatively recently a quote, and forgive me, I can't remember who made the quote, that in this fourth industrial revolution in which we find ourselves, that data is the new economic moat. And I thought about that. I thought, that's a good soundbite, isn't it? Data is the new economic moat. What does that actually mean? And of course, not surprisingly, when I started to unpick it, it's acquiring data. And we can use technology to do that, be that financial or non-financial data. But then it's using technology to sift and analyze that data. But then it's the interpretation of the data. And at least currently, the machines don't seem to be able to do that. So interpreting that data and then using that data that we've interpreted in the right way. And once I got my mind around that, I could see what they meant by data being the new economic moat. And for organizations, the ones who can grab that idea and make it work, they can turn it in to a competitive advantage if they can do it better and perhaps faster than some of their competitors. And go back to my point, that's both financial data and non-financial data. So I was quite taken by that. And this is for somebody coding. As my colleague Barry knows from UCL and Lindsay and some others are on this call, I have trouble turning a laptop on. And that's literal, is it? Barry's nodding. Yes, I often come for help. How do I switch this on? There.
Don't worry, Alan, we'll help you upskill in no time. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for a very thought-provoking set of thoughts from you and different perspectives. Again, the questions that came in, some of them had a lot of overlap, and I think as we were hearing those discussion pieces, we were able to sort of touch on those. So don't feel too upset if I didn't address your question explicitly. It is in there somewhere. So I think I'll hand back to Geraldine.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Chiu, for guiding and facilitating a most engaging and thought-provoking dialogue. Thank you, speakers, for taking the time to share with us your invaluable experiences and views. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your support and participation, and we hope you've enjoyed the discussion. For our guests from the various accounting bodies such as ACCA, CPA, ISCA, and ACAEW, please scan the QR code on the screen to register your attendance to claim your CPD-CPE hours. Before you leave, please take a few minutes to give us your feedback by scanning the QR code on screen. For those who are here at the SIM campus, light refreshments are available outside the theatre. Please follow our ushers. Do stay with us for a short networking session. For our students and alumni from the Master of Science in Professional Accountancy program, please gather at the foyer outside the theatre. Our staff Eon will be waiting for you there. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our future events. Keep healthy and stay safe. Thank you.